UITP, what is it? It stands for International Association of Public Transport, and we are a 130-year-old nonprofit urban public transportation advocacy group that's headquartered in Belgium, and we have 16 regional offices around the world. I'll give you a little. And our main job is advocacy. We really advocate passionately with decision makers around the world, frankly, to promote and push and talk about public transit as not just for the convenience of traveling for the public, but also as a key player in world health, congestion, pollution, lifestyle changes, quality of life. So in Europe, we actually do much more advocacy than, for example, in the United States, but we hope that by bringing knowledge to this region, to Canada and North America, we bring in some fresh ideas and different worldviews about how to make urban transit better. We have a tremendous knowledge base from our members. We have 1,400 members around the world, and most of them are transit agencies, but we also have suppliers and vendors, and there's a tremendous amount of exchange and best practice experience from this knowledge. And we also have an incredible research library which is accessible by members. I'm also happy to say that we have a lot of members in North America, and New York is a member, and agencies from New York City DOT are members. And most of the big transit agencies in the US and Canada are members of us. And why is that? 10 years ago, the picture was different, but now people are traveling more. They're coming back. Gee, I saw this in London, I saw this in Hong Kong, I saw this in Tokyo. The millennials are all over, and they say, like, what's going on in New York? So there is now a hunger for international knowledge because people are awakening to see what's out there. So we are networking, we have knowledge, we have advocacy, best practice experience. That's what we are. So just to show you, we are in 96 countries, and we're very happy to be in North America. And I am UITP North America, and I'm based in New York, a city which I love, by the way, very much. So just to show you an example, early this spring, we had a conference, a huge World Congress in Montreal. We had 2,500 people come to this conference. Not just the transit agencies, but the public came to this conference to hear what's going on around the world. Compared to that, there was a local US conference in Atlanta last week, and the attendance was less. I'm not criticizing that conference. All I'm saying is that now the public is, and transit agencies are eager to find out what's going around the world and to learn and to make comparisons. So this is like motherhood and apple pie. What do customers want? I mean, we all know, obviously, of course I should put safety first, but I put speed. People just want to get to their destinations fast, okay? They want convenience, they want reliability and comfort. But the reason I put this chart up is that we forget something that's very important, and this is maybe less recognized here in this region than elsewhere in the world, that we need to be more quality focused for urban transit. You see that triangle? The general model is, the old model is that quality, fare, and cost are battling each other, okay? We can't give the quality a great subway car because it costs so much more to do it, and if you do that, you may have to charge more fare. So the fare people, the revenue people, and the quality people are constantly battling because they say, I just can't do it because we can't do everything. So the new model to the right is to have everything focused on quality, from the customers, from funding, from cities, from planning agencies. How do we put all these resources, from labor unions, how do we put all our resources together to think with one theme, quality urban transport, okay? Instead of this battle of, I'm sorry, I can only do this if you increase the fare 10 cents, I wish I could do it, but I have no money from Albany or from Washington, etc. So just thinking about quality focus and leading cities in the world. Paris, Moscow is amazing. Tokyo, Hong Kong, They think about quality urban transport, okay? So, next topic, city congestion. You know, I'll be frank with you. I was in a conference in just 2 weeks ago in Vienna. The city is quiet, very few cars. You know, this policy is about promoting transit. Everybody's together, you know. You go to Paris now, even London, okay, even Tokyo. And when I came back here, you know, I mean, I live here, you know, I was born in Europe, but I came here as a child. I came back here and I was in Midtown, and, you know, it was a shock. You know, the congestion here is absolutely unbelievable, and because we all live here, we somehow take it as granted. You just can't move around, you know, and what is being done about it, okay? So we sort of losing the war, and now, of course, everybody's talking about Uber, okay, and automated cars. Well, a train has 2,000 people on it, right? Let's just say everybody says, okay, well, eventually we're going to have automatic cars, you know, I'm going to go from Long Island, again, call a car automatically, come into the city, etc. A train has 2,000 people in it, right? Let's say each car would have 4 people, right? All right? So divide 2,000 by 4. So you're going to have 500 cars per train? I mean, and nobody's thinking about this, okay? It's impossible. There's not enough space for it. So what I'm saying, urban mass transit is here to stay, because it's called mass transit because you're carrying masses. So this whole idea about a shared car and shared use, we have invented that. Urban public transit invented shared use. Okay, the automatic car people saying, oh, gee, shared mobility, all this stuff, you know. We are the inventors of shared use for moving a lot of people, and not the automatic cars, okay? So just give you a little, just food for thought, okay? But we have to work with these new models, of course. For example, just give you an example, in this conference in Europe, many cities now are thinking about urban policy changes where these automatic cars, even with 4 people, might not be allowed as a policy into the city core because simply there's no space. They don't want these cars to attack the city. The city is already attacked by the cars. It is attacked. If you look outside, okay, it's attacked. We are attacked by the cars, okay? So the cities think ahead, yes, you need this new mode of transportation, but maybe as a last mile or first mile, work with transit. So policy levels, technology ways, we have to think about how to work with these new paradigms, connecting with a very innovative and modern mode, urban transit, how to work with the automatic cars. The other thing on the bottom is, I don't think it's recognized in the US. I really don't think so. Maybe in New York, the impact of the economic value that transit brings to the cities. But the question is, what does transit get from all the economic benefits that we give to real estate and businesses? What do we get out of it? Okay? You know, you have somebody building a house or a condominium next to a rail station and can charge nice rents because you're close to the train station. But what are we getting from that developer for transit? We have to say, gee, you're getting something from us, we want to get something from you. And later I'm going to talk to you about a very specific conference we're going to have UITP in Washington, D.C., talking about how to get more value out of the value we give to others that are there because of transit. Changing demographics. Everybody's talking about the millennials, etc. You know, that they take. You know, I have a son, 25 years old. He doesn't have a driver's license, and he told me 60% of his friends don't have a license and don't want it, and they don't have cars. But somebody just told me a very interesting perspective. Yes, that's true, but also an element why they don't want cars because they can't afford them. Because there are very few steady jobs, and you know, if you don't have a steady job, you know, you may not be able to buy a car. So just think about this element, that it's not just the new lifestyle trends of, gee, I can live with a car, but also it's the cost idea that you just cannot buy a car anymore, you know. When I was 19 years old, I bought a car for $3,000, brand new, you know, and I was a waiter in a Catskills for 2 summers. I bought the car with cash. You can't do that now. You can't do that by working at McDonald's. So just think about it, okay? There is a third bullet there, automation. I keep talking about automation. Well, there's tremendous opportunities for automation for transit, okay? We are a urban, especially the subway system, you know, we're electrical, okay? We have electrical systems, we have signaling systems, we have very sophisticated subway cars. So this whole idea about that only the automobile can be automated is sort of a very segmented thinking, and I think we should, and we'll talk about it a little more, there are opportunities to use automation technology for urban transit. I mean, look, you took an automated transit entity to come to this conference. What was that? The elevator. It has a dedicated right-of-way. It has platform doors, okay? And it's automatic, okay? It's very simple, okay? So there are connections to that, and I'll talk about it a little more, okay? I heard everybody talks about mobility as a service. This whole idea about now people want to go from A to B regardless how, okay? You want to go on a bike, take your bike to a ferry, take a ferry to a bus, then take the bus to a subway, etc. So that's what people want now. They don't care how is it, you know, they go in different ways. But look at the fare structure for St. Louis region, okay? I went out to the Rockaways to test the new New York ferry system, okay? It's a great service, okay? I got on a ferry, and I said, well, I have a Metro card. Sir, we have absolutely nothing to do with the Metro card, okay? You know, so, I mean, you know, of course I knew that, okay? But it was like almost like as if I'm saying something radical, you know? Why can't you rent a city bike with a Metro card? Or if you're a city bike member, maybe you will get 5% off of a Metro card to use the subway. So, you know, you have to think everything is very fragmented. And while I'm on this topic, and this was mentioned before by other speakers, there is really no integrated regional planning in the city. Think about it. I mean, there's a regional plan association. They make plans. There's no, and I repeat this, there's no integrated regional planning. Metropolitan planning organizations, okay? As soon as you cross the river, and Joel can testify to this, you're in a different world. You need a passport to get there. It's a whole different planning agency. The divide is on Hudson River. Well, we have a region here, okay? So MTA does transit, New York City DOT does traffic and streets, okay? The Port Authority does one train path, okay, which is a very busy railroad, but just 13 stations. Look at the bridges. The bridges that go across the Hudson Port Authority, then the bridges over the East River is New York City DOT. So it's fragmented, okay? And also, there's no dedicated, long-term, dependable funding source. We talked about it before. Okay, so I want to show you a little chart just to show you what's going around. I mean, you heard this before, that now finally, I think about 5 years ago, more than half of the world is urban. When urban doesn't mean you live in Manhattan. It means like you live in a city environment where you depend on a city for your lifestyle or work, okay? So now it's probably 55%. But this chart shows you the incredible growth of urbanization, and urban transit, urban public transit is the heart of this development. These cities, if you go to China, as somebody said, cities are exploding with new transportation, new subway system. You know, you look out a window and suddenly the next morning there's a new line with 10 stations, okay? Just back to automation. Again, this is just to tell you, there are now 38 cities in the world with automatic metros. And I just want to say with my friend John, is that automatic metros doesn't mean unattended. It means the people who drive the trains are not doing their job, but they are being promoted into higher level jobs. Nobody's losing a job. You promote those people who are in routine jobs, difficult, stressful jobs, and you promote those people into higher quality jobs as customer service agents, work in a control center, information, intermodal knowledge persons, light maintenance, you know. So the point is that just because you have an automated system doesn't mean that it's laborless, that you elevate the people's jobs into a higher level. And this was happening in the world. And by tomorrow, I probably would add one more city. It's growing incredibly. And just to show you, these are some of the cities with automated trains. In North America, there's only one, which is Vancouver. It's in Canada. And one is being built in Honolulu, believe it or not, okay? I'm not counting the airport movers, all those things are, we are sort of consider them as toys, okay? We're talking about real transit, okay? So that's just a trend. I just give you a little wake-up call, that's what's happening. And this whole thing about automated cars, whatever, there's opportunity for automation for buses, paratransit, trains, etc. And by the way, we have one, the air train, okay? All right. I talked about mobility service. I know I don't have much time. I want to talk about this. I want to go back on this thing. Money is not there. And you heard about comment about Washington. Money is not going to come. It's not easy. So the fares, especially in this country, just don't cover the operating costs. New York City, by the way, people don't know this, we are probably the best in the US for covering more of our costs than other systems in the world, okay? So we go around the US, usually the fare covers 25% of the cost. In New York City, it's about 60%. And because of this, one of the metros in the US, one of the systems like Washington, D.C., asked us, asked UITP to have a conference in Washington, D.C., which we're going to have on December 7th, about creative ideas how to generate more income for transit systems for not the fare from other sources. I asked the head of the Washington Metro, what do you want? Do you want concessions, PPPs, joint developments, TODs? And he said, all for everything, okay? So this whole conference is going to be bringing in from around the world knowledgeable, creative people how to create money for transit from other sources. By the way, we have a beautiful example here in New York. You just go down to Grand Central Station to a low level. That's an example, okay, where you can do something great, get money from it. It really improves not just transit mobility, but it's a lifestyle change. It's connected to transit. Gee, I took a train, but I can also eat. Okay, so it's a struggle, okay? I mean, congestion is there, and it requires buy-in. And this I want to say, it requires a buy-in from three important elements of society, and I call them the PPPs. The politicians, and Ydanis is the best friend. I mean, he's fantastic. He bought in, he knows that, transit is important. That's the first P. The press. You go around the world, the press likes the trains, it's their own system. They don't beat up the system. Here, generally the news articles like looking for a bad story, oh my God, disaster, accidents and all that, anything happens on the trains, first page of the newspaper, okay? Meanwhile, you have hundreds of automobile accidents all over the city. It's like in a little column or nowhere, okay? So that's the second P. And the third P is the public. Sometimes the public is the worst enemy. Like we had a comment about Second Avenue subway, how horrible it is. Well, it's beautiful, okay? I mean, you have to start someplace. So sometimes the public is our worst enemy, saying like, oh my God, whatever, okay? So those are the PPPs. So I think if the three Ps buy in and supporting transit, we'll be in better shape, okay? All right? And just a very last comment about my recommendation for better service here. And you heard it from many people, dwell time management is probably the most critical thing we have to do. And again, I just tell you funny, my observation is true, and you may laugh at this. New York City is the only city in the world where holding a subway car door open is considered to be a polite gesture. I take this for me as a fact. You can check it around. If you go to London, I was in Atlanta last week, and somebody held the door. This tall military type person got up and he said, ma'am, you're holding me up, okay? You wouldn't do that in New York. And just to give you the little perspective, if you delay the dwell time, let's say a line is 50 stations long, 50 stations line, right? If you increase the dwell time by 5 seconds at each of the stations, 5 seconds, okay? You got 250 seconds, right? All right? That's 4 minutes. Assuming a train can go every 2 minutes, that behavior, the 5 seconds patient, is costing the taxpayers and transit authority 2 trains to provide the same service. 2 trains, each train is $30 million or more, and operating costs forever. So when somebody says, what's a big deal, 5 seconds? Oh, you're a nice person, hold the door, okay? And people hold the door more than 5 seconds. This is a small example. I'm just being optimistic. So I'll leave you with the thought that this knowledge, you have to know about how even passenger behavior can have devastating economic and fiscal consequences, you know, and the public doesn't know it. They say, Joe, what's a big deal, you know? And because it affects the dwell time, it creates delays and congestion and frustration, and you see the newspaper stories, etc. So I'll leave you with that, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. It is an honor to be here with great experts on this issue of transportation. The MTA has in schedule to upgrade the transit signal by 1945. So I'm 52 years old. It means that I will be 85 years old by the time all the transit signals will be upgraded. Do we agree that we can do it sooner? Right? I think that this is something that, with the new leadership of the MTA, and with real determination from the governors and leaders here in the city, we can shorten the period of time. I believe that in a state, in a city, where the governor has been able to build the Mario Cuomo Bridge, where he's also renovating the LaGuardia Airport, where Mayor de Blasio being able to establish UPK, where we have seen, the end of a stop and frisk. I believe that we have to work together to modernize the transit system in the next 10 years. That should be the legacy for the governor, for the mayor, and for all the stakeholders. That should be something that we should leave not only for the present, but also for the future generation. As in my role as transportation chair, I'm responsible for overseeing the Department of Transportation, Taxi Limousine Commission, and a small part overseeing the MTA through the city budget process. This opportunity provides me a unique view into how New Yorkers and our visitors move around and how we as a city can do better. As such, I'll discuss with you all the potential for New York to craft a brighter and more sustainable future through a policy focus and major investments in public transit infrastructure. To start, I want to bring us back to the early 1900s, when earlier visionary New Yorkers began to conceptualize the subway system we enjoy today. Well, enjoy might be a strong word, as a system that we have it, but at least one that gets us around to most part of the New York City, even though we have some area in Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, that they had to deal with transportation deserts. During this time, horses was the preferred way to get around. These innovative New Yorkers decided to think big. They realized that in order to make New York City a powerhouse on the world stage, residents needed to get around efficiently, cleanly, and safely. This visionary built a massive subway system that has sustained and driven New York's economy over decades, making us the city we are today. Now it is our time to be visionary for the present and the future of a great city, a city that the whole nation rely on. Since then, the rise of the personal car has clogged our streets, turned valuable real estate into parking lot, and leaves countless New Yorkers frustrated as they sit in gridlock traffic. There are today 1.4 million car owners in New York City. For disclosures, I'm one of those. However, most New Yorkers rely on public transportation. While I must disclose again that I had my car, I know that for many New Yorkers who have cars, especially those in Queens and Brooklyn, this as a car because they had to walk 15 blocks to go from a train to their houses. In cities around the world, there's a growing realization that urban centers cannot grow and drive economically if cars are the primary way residents get around. It has been my vision, while in my role as transportation chair, to ensure New York is not falling behind in this global trend. And I've been proposing that by 2030, we should have a plan to reduce the number of New Yorkers that own cars from 1.4 million to 1 million if we do better on public transportation. The only way we can continue to add more residents while maintaining a safe and prosperous cities is to move decisively away from personal vehicles and toward public transit. Today we're facing a challenge similar to that of the 1900s, where car traffic is mounting Manhattan, and where are we must think boldly about how we are to progress. This, first and foremost, means seriously investing in a subway system valued at over $1 trillion. That's the value access of the MTA. Subway ridership hit historic height in the past few years, but has since begun to decline again. Stories in the Times have said that New Yorkers are turning more to e-hail app to get around due to low prices and convenience, reliable service. This used to be said about subway services, but the growing frequency in delays and breakdowns have caused consumers to vote with their feet and turn away from transit. It shows a clear need to rebuild and restore subway system, not just to where we were in recent years, but to where we should go in the decades to come. The MTA approved a nearly $30 billion capital plan to upgrade the many systems they oversee. That include not just the subway system, but the Metro North, Long Island Railroad, bridges, and tunnels, and more. It is a 5-year program that amounts to about 5 to 6 billion per year during this time. This is the plan that many transportation advocates, including myself, advocate strongly for, understanding the cost of inaction in maintaining or strengthening our infrastructures is more cars on our road and ultimately economic decline. I believe that there is real proposal on the table on how we can raise the revenue, and I think that we should consider all proposals. For taxing the millionaire, to putting the tolls coming to Midtown. Of course, we need to have real discussion with the residents of Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. We should provide incentive to the residents of those areas so that they should have a reduce of payment in those tolls. And some of those money to be raised, which is estimated at $1.4 billion. Some of those money should be reinvested in the local communities that those residents in those boroughs that they use cars also to come here to Midtown. High cost and project delivery delay have created hesitancy in some lawmakers and the public when it comes to laying out so many vital resources. I want to say that they are right to be hesitant. Now, we could have been the initial cause, but because of lack of control is an oversight in places. MTA has to control the cost, as we also will work with them to raise the revenue that they need. As the Second Avenue subway was wrapping up its phase one completion last year, Governor Cuomo rightly held the contractor's feet to the fire by demanding this project be completed by the end of the year. Much was made of this action, and rightly so. I will ask the governor to hold the feet to all MTA contractors to the fire to bring this mega project online years earlier. and also reduce the cost. We are the city building more expensive in the whole world when it comes to any project that is related to transportation. This can be done by putting accountability standards into place during contract negotiations, ensuring that construction companies be at the cost of budget overrun and face penalty to running over a schedule. There's more than 10 international companies that they do the same job, that only 2 companies being selected by the MTA for most of the project. So in order to reduce the time for the project to be completed, let's expand the number of corporations doing contracts with the MTA. One good place to start would be the use of design build used to build the Mario Cuomo Bridge. This method of procurement, putting the design and construction phase together, can seriously shorten project timeline and cut system costs. Today, New York State has not given city agency the ability to use design build, something that I hope will change this year. It makes sense for all municipalities to save on the money and cost for capital projects, and you can see the state money as well. And that should be the same thing for any project that the MTA has in a schedule for the present and the future. We must also create dedicated funding stream for capital improvements plan. To this day, we do not know where much of the state's funding for the MTA capital plan will come from. This scares many into believing it will continue to be funded by debt that in turn raise the cost fares. To avoid an increase in fare, we should also employ creative policy solutions that decentralize car use while funding transit improvement. We have to consider various ways to generate funding. The best place to start would be congestion pricing to the Samsung Move New York plan. While this is a sensitive topic politically, it could help to solve congestion problems in the city center. Traffic, pollution, parking, college collisions, lack of open space, and more. By placing tolls on the lower Manhattan Bridge into the central business district, where congestion is worse, we can keep more cars and trucks out of the area while gaining revenue for transit from those willing to pay the premium. Other plans to create revenue are the New York City Controller's Stringer State Bond Plan, Mayor de Blasio Fixed Plan, and at the state level, Assemblymember Jeff Ydanis income tax set aside. All of these plans will raise a combined $27.1 billion, from $27 to $28 billion in dedicated funding for the MTA over the 10 years. It can prolong the usage lifeline of city streets with less cars and trucks on them, and pay for upgrade and service expansion into places like Utica Avenue and South Bronx. That money can be also used to bring all the bus land that we cut in 2010 when the TW, they fought so hard against it. And many residents in Queens and Brooklyn, they lost many bus lanes. Our buses have the opportunity to be turned as an above the ground train system. On other policy fronts, the city can take the lead. During the effort to pass Bill de Blasio's zoning for quality and affordability plan, the mayor was forced to weaken the bold effort to reduce mandatory parking minimum in city buildings near transit. This is because too many New Yorkers remain hooked to the car. I'm a proponent that we need to reduce the request for developers to provide parking and what they build, and instead to use the value to improve our transportation. But if we want to move ahead toward reducing car usage, we should be more ambitious. A plan called to reducing mandatory parking minimum in new buildings, as I said before, this is something that we should work right now. I think we, as a city, should think bigger, as a state too. Let's start by eliminating mandatory parking minimum in all buildings, and let's work together to be sure that all council members support that plan. Finally, along these lines, our city should continue its physical street transformations, providing space to those that want to travel cleanly and efficiently by bike and also walk. We need to share the street. The street does not belong only to car owners. Cycling in New York City remains too dangerous to many who might make the switch from car to bike. That's why we need to make most of the bike lane protected bike lane. That's why the rapid construction of projected bike lane is so critical, not just because it makes cycling safer, it provides a physical notice to New Yorkers on the things that cycling might be the best choices. We also have to have a better payment system. Someone that uses a Metro card to take a train should be able to transfer when they take a bike and when they take a ferry too. If the city expanded mass transportation and some of the 1.4 million drivers switch to bikes or they walk, we will be taking hundreds of thousands of cars on the street, but we need to improve our train system in order for that to happen. We can drive a better future by not driving at all. It is my goal to see reduction, as I said before, cars in our street. I think we can accomplish this goal, but not only if we put our money but only if we put our money and also work together, the city and the state, to get those things, see those things happen. It means real investment in transformative infrastructure. It means not thinking about just maintaining the system of the past to manage their historic capacity, but by expanding their capacity to take 1 million more or millions more. It means making clear through word, action, and investment that our future is not the car, but the train, buses, and bikes. In a modest but important effort to this goal, early this year, I hope to organize the first car-free day, something that we'll be dedicating every year, and the next one is gonna be Sunday, April 22, 2018. Last year, we closed Broadway from 47 to Union Square, and we dedicated the street for cyclists and pedestrians, but also we use those time to talk about the future of mass transportation. The time for investment to the public transportation is now. That's not our children's responsibility. We cannot fall behind as other cities make these improvements. We are competing with London, Shanghai, and others. And as a city and as a state, we should be ahead of them. I will leave you all with some good food for thought. Paris has started an Ambition 25 billion project to build for new subway lines, 68 stations, and more than 120 miles of track by 2030. This is what we are competing with. While as today we are behind, there's still time to take the necessary steps to think big and build a brighter tomorrow. Let's do it together. The time is now. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody? So I have a bit of a different perspective to talk about, not so much on the kind of broader academic kind of items that almost everybody, in fact, touched on. I want to talk about kind of really a worker-oriented perspective about what went wrong with the system, what's going on with the system right now, mistakes that were made, and how not to repeat those mistakes going forward. And some of it touches on a very real level about everything that the prior speakers spoke about, but just on a real practical level on the subway tracks and in the surface transit system. So, and by the way, my name is John Samuelsen. I'm the international president of the Transport Workers Union. Until about 3 weeks ago, I was the president of TW Local 100 as well. And I've been the national president since May 1st, and I was the president of Local 100 since December 9th, 2009. So I kind of bring a little bit of experience to this conversation. So we have what's a transit crisis, what everybody recognizes as a transit crisis. And what I want to call the symptoms or how this transit crisis is manifesting itself to the everyday rider and to transit workers: trains breaking down, track fires, signal malfunctions, overcrowded trains causing delays, and complete state of unreliability in the system. But also from our perspective, transit workers getting assaulted, bus operators getting punched in the face and spat upon because of overcrowded buses, train operators and conductors getting kicked and punched because of frustrated riders with this system, which is something that folks in the room might not ordinarily tie together with this crisis, but in fact they're directly related. And they're directly related to all the funding issues that everybody spoke about. Because when the MTA cuts service, it's not the folks, the bean counters that make those decisions, or the bosses that make those decisions, that get punched in the face and spat upon. It's the members of the Transport Workers Union and Amalgamated Transit that are the front line representatives of the MTA that have the ire of the riding public and that frustration taken out upon them. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix because it's something that ordinary average folks may not see. So I think everybody realizes how we got where we are, or many people do. It's just been decades of underinvestment in the system. And I want to go back to 1980. And in 1980 or so, let's say the early 1980s, when the first capital plan came about, when Ravitch came in, and the first capital plan came about, derailments were a weekly occurrence. I'm looking at George and smiling a little bit and there's actually some other transit veterans in the room that, Local 100 TW veterans in the room that lived through a chunk of it. But I was in, I want to say grammar school, at least in the beginning. But trains were going off the tracks as a matter of routine. And a big infusion of cash came into the system. The system was righted, reliability was restored back into the system, and things were going good for a while. They were going good for a while. Miles of tracks were rebuilt. The reliability was restored back into the signal system, which I want to talk about in a little more detail. And I want to comment on some of the things that not only what Ydanis said, but Parina Sanchez as well, in terms of signal overhaul and what that means and what it can mean to everyday riders. So I think when you have entities like the New York City Transit Authority or any other of the agencies in the MTA, and I'm certainly not an expert on what transit agencies do in other cities, but I would imagine it's very similar. So we get the system back together in the early 1980s, and lo and behold, within about 8 years of the system being back together, the decision makers at the MTA, their instinctive decision, as soon as there's a little bit of a money crunch, they say, you know what, things are going good, let's defer maintenance. Let's begin to defer maintenance. And once they begin to defer maintenance, that slippery slope begins, and it might not turn into an explosive situation to years down the line, but we have a situation where there was several deferrals of maintenance, and the crisis that we are suffering in the New York City transit system today is by and large a product of the repeated deferrals of maintenance that we've seen over the years. And it began with deferrals of signal maintenance back in the late 90s. So there was an additional deferral of maintenance in 2010, and Ydanis mentioned the economic crisis, which was a legitimate economic crisis in 2010. And the response to that economic crisis was to defer out maintenance of rolling stock, and that deferral of maintenance of rolling stock proved disastrous. Doors are breaking down, everything's breaking down on trains right now, and it's causing chaos for rush hour riders in New York City Transit. And the fact of the matter is it's beginning to be reversed right now, and the positive effects of the investment, of the reinvestment right now that's going back into the system should be being felt right now. The amount of work that we're doing in the subway and in the cars and bonds in New York City Transit is unfathomable. It's amazing, the amount of work. I've never seen this much work going on in the 25 years I've been here. So just to get back to that idea of deferred maintenance and capital money, and to sort of link the two together. There's substantial capital commitments going on. I want to say substantial capital investments going on, but I had this debate with Richard Ravitch that I have no desire to ever have again. So I'm changing the way I refer to it. So I've been saying that this is a 30-some-odd million dollar capital investment, and Richard Ravitch went on the radio and corrected me and said, Samuelsen's wrong, it's not a $30 million capital investment because the money's not there. The money's not there, but the work is being done. So it is a capital commitment because the boots are on the ground in the New York City subway system performing this work. So I don't want to split hairs with Richard Ravitch, who's a highly intelligent guy that I have a lot of respect for, and I happen to like a lot. So there is a capital commitment that's producing a lot of work in the New York City subway system right now, and has been for quite some time. And the amount of work that actually predated what is known as this crisis, this current crisis, the capital work was actually going on right then. So I think there's a lesson to be learned. I'm now going totally off my notes here. I'm not even looking at them anymore. There's a big lesson to be learned before I go back to my notes. And it has to be learned going forward. And it should have been learned in 1980. We should have never deviated from it. When you have a massive capital infusion of cash or infusion of capital work, never again can the MTA allow the day-to-day reliability of the system to get cast to the side. And that is what happened. There's a big amount of capital work going on. The day-to-day work that keeps that system going, that keeps folks on time in their rush hour commute, was forgotten about. And reliability was cast to the side. Maintenance was deferred, essentially. And when maintenance gets deferred, people are late to work. Trains break down, rolling stock breaks down, signals break down, track fires happen because track crews are now scrambling to do routine maintenance rather than cleaning paper off of tracks. When you don't clean paper off of tracks, track fires start, trains get delayed, and it's this very kind of like it rolls like a snowball, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So this has now happened a few different times over the last 30 years, and the MTA right now needs to learn that lesson going forward forevermore. And I've had these conversations with Loda. I've had these conversations with Ronnie Hakem. I believe they understand this is what has happened. I've had these conversations with Governor Cuomo. Never again can the MTA fall into the trap, either in New York City Transit or on a Long Island Railroad or Metro North, or any of the systems that they oversee. Any kind of capital investment has to be accompanied with a massive infusion of cash to maintain day-to-day reliability so that folks get to work in a reliable fashion. Otherwise, all the capital money in the world that's geared toward the long-term sustainability of the system is not going to get New York City transit riders to work on time. It's just not going to. It'll get them to work on time 10 years from now, but it's not going to get them to work on time tomorrow. So everybody understands what I'm saying about that? It's really the most important piece of this puzzle that folks don't talk about a lot. Everybody talks about capital. Capital's great. We need capital to sustain the long-term reliability of the system. And in fact, that these capital investments were made properly in the 1990s after the initial capital investments that were done under Richard Ravitch. So if these capital investments were made in the 90s, the massive amount of money that would be required to get the system back into a state of reliability right now wouldn't be so onerous. But the fact that there were gaps in the capital investments into New York City Transit and the MTA, there were gaps under Pataki and others, but gaps under Pataki. If those investments had been made steadily, we wouldn't be having this reliability crisis that we're having right now. So I think there's anytime there's a gap in long-term investment, long-term capital investment, there's going to be a reliability crisis 10 years out. I don't know what the exact formula is, but there'll be a reliability crisis sometime later as a result of a failure to invest in capital investment for long-term sustainability of the system going forward. So with that said, to address this immediate problem, the immediate reliability problem, Local 100, in response to a lot of academic discussion, not to take away anything that academics have to add to this whole equation because they have a lot to add, we just have a different perspective and we have a different element to add to this. We developed this whole plan, which is a very simple plan, actually. It's a very basic plan called our 10-point work boots on the ground plan that we presented to the Daily News editorial board, and we were happy that the MTA went on to adopt vast elements of the plan, and it was really back to basics. Roll back the deferred maintenance, come up with a system to infuse more bodies onto the railroad track so that track maintenance is being done properly, debris is being removed off the track so that track fires don't start and slow down trains. Reverse the years of shortcutting maintenance personnel on the tracks, which is a completely penny-wise and dollar-foolish approach to managing this system. It's a labor-intensive system, and it just is. Track work is essentially done the same way it was done in the 1880s, despite, you're a technology guy probably. It just is. Although there is some level of automation when it comes to track maintenance and construction work, the New York City subways were built a long time ago, as everybody in the room knows. And in order to get 39-foot lengths of rail into the subway, you need a work train. In order to unload those 39-foot lengths of rail, you need track workers. And in order to install those rails on the track, you need track workers and you need hooks. And what we call humping rail in the middle of the night in the system to get those rails into place. It's labor intensive. It doesn't come without track workers. And the same could be said for vast elements of signal work. So every time you cut personnel in the subway system, you risk having a reliability crisis. And the Transit Authority had done that by and large, particularly in the aftermath of the 2010 economic situation. So the 10-point plan that we had required a reinvestment in basic fundamental maintenance procedures. That's being done right now, and the positive results of that are going to be felt both on the subway side, what we call the right-of-way side or the maintenance of way side, where track fires now are going to, the data will be produced at MTA board meetings, but ultimately that data is going to show a reduction in track fires. It's going to show a reduction in signal failures. And on the rolling stock side, where the amount of work being done in the bonds is historical right now. There's work being done literally around the clock in ways that it hasn't been done in decades in order to get our rolling stock back into a place where trains are not breaking down during rush hour and completely destroying the rush hour commute of millions of New Yorkers every week or every month. So that's happening. We put this plan forth. The MTA haggled with us a bit about how to execute this plan and ultimately agreed to vast elements of it. And also, didn't agree with us on some elements, which we're still debating them about. So a couple of other points I want to make, if I can. I'm not out of time or anything, am I? Okay. Some folks mentioned the bus system. And the bus system becomes a very important element of the subway system, particularly in Manhattan and particularly in downtown Brooklyn and some parts of the Bronx and other parts of the city as well. Now, what's gone on in Manhattan is for a whole bunch of reasons, and I can name a couple of them, and some of it relates to, I want to backtrack and talk about the signal system for a second. Ydanis made a comment about the signal system being into overhauled by 1945, right? So, is that what you said? No, 2045. 2045. And the previous speaker from the RPA said 13% of the signal breakdowns, 13% of the delays are because of signal breakdowns. But all of that is not necessary. Well, aside from what Ydanis said, the signal failures are not necessarily fixed by capital money. They're not, those breakdowns are not necessarily, the fix is not necessarily a massive capital investment. 13% of signal failures can be fixed by an investment in day-to-day reliability of the signal system. And that's what I'm talking about, how these two, they work synergistically with each other and they have to go hand in hand. Capital investment has to go hand in hand with an operating investment into the system. And because 13% of the rush hour delays are caused by signal failures, it doesn't necessarily automatically mean that we have to just, this means we have to triple down on capital investment into the signal system and forget about the operating budget. In all likelihood, the 13% of the signal failures that are experienced by the New York City transit system, they could be reduced dramatically as we build out the signal system through capital investment. We could reduce the 13% of signal delays by investing in day-to-day reliability, which is the operating budget. And that's a point I wanted to make. And I think that you have to articulate what you mean when you say that the signal system by 2045 needs to be rebuilt. I mean, what does that mean? Does it mean that the existing signal system has to be rebuilt? Does it mean that CBTC has to be overlaid onto the signal system and overbuilt onto the existing signal system? Because it's not necessarily accepted logic on behalf of New York City transit workers that the CBTC lines are more economical and productive across that entire system because of the structure of the New York City subway system on curved track, and there's a whole bunch of elements of that. So to make that blanket statement is one thing, but it's a very complicated analysis that needs to be done. So with that said, the bus system in Manhattan, the bus system, the speeds of the buses have dropped dramatically, really dramatically. The average weekday speed for a bus is like 5 miles an hour or something like that in Manhattan. So when the bus speeds are 5 miles an hour, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Traffic is one reason, big reason for that. But it's also the amount of pedestrian plazas that are all over Manhattan has contributed to that. It's also street design elements. And Ydanis talked about, and I know folks aren't going to want to hear this probably, but you talked about street design and pedestrian and shared streets and pedestrian streets. If all of, and I don't disagree with that, but if the folks in New York City that have a vision for the next 10 or 20 years going forward, and Perina from the RPA mentioned the same exact thing about the idea of shared streets with pedestrians and bicycles. If you don't take a holistic approach to that and figure out how buses are going to maneuver through those shared streets at speeds that are increased off of 5 miles an hour, and those streets are designed in such a way that slow the buses down even more, then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. And right now, the street designs in Manhattan are not necessarily, the way they redesign these streets with pedestrian plazas and even bike lanes to some extent are part of the cause of slowing the buses down. So if you're talking about an intermodal transit system, it has to be designed holistically with the understanding that buses are creeping along the streets of New York City. And if the reason for pedestrian right-of-way, increased pedestrian right-of-way areas, safe pedestrian right-of-way areas, and safe bike areas in New York City is to enhance the intermodal transportation system, at least on the bike side, then it makes no sense to do it in such a way that it hampers bus traffic in Manhattan. It just doesn't, it makes no sense. People understand what I'm saying? And if you talk to a bus operator at a Quill Depot or at any of our Manhattan depots, they'll give you an earful about pedestrian plazas and on-time bus performance and pressure coming from New York City Transit Management. And it's not, and also about New York City DOT and MTA relationships as it comes to street design and what it's going to and what the impact is going to be on surface transit in Manhattan. There has to be some sort of meeting of the minds and some sort of holistic approach, which everybody at the table, all of the previous speakers have spoken about. But there has to be a kind of eye in the sky look toward all of these various approaches that folks want to take. But if you take steps that slow the buses down, then you can't complain about the buses going slow. Just can't have your cake and eat it too. So with the buses going slow, we all know the buses go slow. What that's caused is a migration from the bus system into the subway system. That's what it's caused. And much of the overcrowding in the subway system, particularly in Manhattan, and as I said, in areas of downtown Brooklyn and other areas, is that migration came from the buses. It's gone into the tracks. It's gone onto the subways. I'm a trackman. I automatically say it's gone onto the tracks. So it's gone into the subway system. That's caused a substantially increased amount of wear and tear on a rolling stock. What that's done is taken rolling stock out of service. It's caused breakdowns of rolling stock during inopportune times, such as rush hour. It's caused an increased amount of maintenance to happen on rolling stock. But also, the more folks that migrated out of the bus system onto the tracks, I'm just giving you a few examples. I'm kind of just having a conversation. The more folks that migrate off the buses into the subway, the more garbage ends up on the subway tracks, the more garbage that ends up on the subway tracks, the more track fires happen on the subway tracks. And it has this snowball effect. So we, as part of the 10-point plan that the TW put forth to the Daily News, one element that went a little bit unnoticed in the midst of a lot of media coverage that we got about it is our instruction to the MTA. I want to say suggestion, but it's beyond a suggestion, that they take a step back and take a massive relook. Take a massive relook at surface transit in Manhattan. And it's our belief as the workers that run this system that the MTA has a penchant for. And there's been the buses go slow. This is like a vicious cycle. The buses go slow in Manhattan for a whole bunch of reasons. Uber is another, the amount of traffic. Uber is another reason, and Uber-like entities. So the buses go slow, riders go into the subway system, less people on the buses. So the MTA has a penchant for saying there's less people on the buses, let's cut service even more. So they cut service even more, and even more people go into the subway system, and there's like an exponential negative effect. Our position, our belief is that the MTA needs to do a massive reinvestment in surface transit. Rather than disinvest, they need to do a massive reinvestment in surface transit. If they do a reinvestment in surface transit, including bus rapid transit, which has really never been properly explored, properly invested in Manhattan, select bus services, bus rapid transit light. It's not that it's not a good thing. I'm not saying it's not a good thing. But real bus rapid transit with real dedicated lanes, with a real monetary investment, would pull people back out of the subway. It would relieve the stress that we have on the subway right now. It would massively increase, in a really positive way, the capacity of this intermodal, beautiful transport system that we have in New York City, and it's never been properly done. And when de Blasio got elected, there was a lot of talk about dedicated bus rapid transit lanes, and that kind of devolved into select bus service pretty quickly. And that's what the MTA, the DOT, the powers that be need to get together. When this subway crisis the reliability crisis, let's call it that, is under control, the MTA, particularly the MTA, but the DOT, all of the stakeholders need to get together, and they need to reevaluate the bus system. A lot of these routes were designed 60, 70, 80 years ago. They need to figure out they need to figure out whether these routes make sense in today's day and age, for one thing, and they need to just pump cash into the system rather than divest from the system. So I don't want to keep repeating myself. I'm getting it signed. And I do want to say one more thing. I want to leave with these words. The RPA talked about a release of this fourth plan on November 30th. And they talked about stakeholders. You're talking about automation. And so they talked about stakeholders that they've talked with. I just want to say that nobody's talked to the Transport Workers Union about anything. I have no idea what's in that plan on November 30th. And if there's anything, if anybody had any desire to see real change happen in the subway and bus system, they need to talk to the Transport Workers Union, because if it's going to affect our livelihoods, they're going nowhere fast with it without any conversation with us. And that's what I have to say. Last thing. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And I hope what I had to say added to this conversation. So thank you.
I'd like to give one more round of a hand to the entire panel. Very enlightening. Now we have a chance. I'm sure you all have comments and questions. I want to make one amendment to the procedure before, and that is, I'm going to do 3 questions in quick succession. And then, but before you ask your question or give your comment, please state your name. Tell us who you are. So comments and questions. Emphasis on questions, though. There's 3 people right up here. Then we'll go that direction. Oh, I'm sorry. Then we'll get there.
Good morning. My name is Sharice DeBose. I work at the Transport Workers Union. So when I received the invitation to attend this morning, I was happy that John was actually on the panel, because a lot of times when there are transit issues and transit forums, TWU is not at the table. So my question is, going forward, for everyone that's been on the panel today, how would you, or what would be your plan to make sure that you speak with representatives at TWU Local 100 to make sure that we're not left out of the process?
Larry Parks. Just want to comment on something that John said about this business with the bike racks and the plazas. And I live up on 58th Street off First Avenue, and I've noticed that during rush hour, a 6-lane street can sometimes be reduced to a 2-lane street. And the traffic backs up all the way from, I'd say, 59th Street, all the way back to 42nd Street, and even lower, sometimes back to 34th Street. This is insanity. And if you look at the bike lanes, maybe there's a couple of people riding on the bikes, but basically everybody else is stuck. So maybe this whole business about plazas and all these bike lanes ought to be revisited and not appear in the central city. I mean, it may be fine in Brooklyn and Queens and whatnot, but it certainly makes no sense to take a 6 lanes, during rush hour especially, a 6-lane street, make it into 2 lanes.
Thank you. A little anecdote. I live in the 70s, West 70s, and when I want to go from 72nd Street Broadway to 42nd Street, if time is a matter, I will never take the bus. You have the 11, the 5, the 7, because it takes me 3 minutes to go from 72nd Street to 42nd Street, and 45 minutes to go by bus. So, question of dedicated lanes for buses, it doesn't work right now because cabs use it, turning. What about the idea of bringing back the trolley with a dedicated lane with tracks, and no one can go on that except the trolley, and the trolley has right of way?
It's open to the panel. Whoever.
First of all, we need to be open to anything that we have to do when it comes to improving transportation, rebuilding our transportation. As I said before, great leaders, they had the vision, they worked to leave the system that they built 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago for us. Now it's up to us to build a system not only for us, but also for the future generation. So I think that we have to be open on anything. I also believe that it is important on the conversation, and as you ask, yes, TW Local 100 should be on the table on any conversation that any elected, including myself and anybody, is having about the present and future transportation. And sometimes that's a mistake that we have made. So, but the question is about, it's not looking at the past, it's about where are we today and where are we moving forward. I want to add on the buses, I think that enforcement is a key issue. You know, let's put it, and I don't think at the end of the day, John and I disagree, we having the plaza, pedestrian plaza in the street. It's all about how can we share the street. I think that having a society today where no one brought a coat, everyone is wearing comfortable clothing today, where the weather is around 60 degrees by this time. Having Maria, having Irma, having Sandy, having Katrina in the last 20 years. As someone who lives in Staten Island, you know, who lost a loved one, who lives in Far Rockaway, climate change is real. And I think that we need to build a society that is more walkable. And I think that the only way of how we can build a walkable society is by investing on public transportation. As I say, it's not my business to fix the problem to any relative or friend of my constituency about the car, building more parking for our residents. In New York City, that's not our business. In New York City, it's to upgrade the public transportation. I believe that if we work on enforcement, if, first of all, the bus lane should be dedicated yet for bus drivers, and the NYPD had to do a better job of being sure that drivers, car owners, they get tickets if they blocking any buses. If we do enforcement and we identify that there's some plaza that they are slowing down the buses in a way that someone like you, myself, or anyone is moving from point A to point B cannot get there or it takes 45 minutes, then we need to, you know, go back and see what happened. But I think that the reason why most of the buses are not moving fast enough, and if someone gets to a place faster walking than in a bus, is because we are not enforcing.
So, this is on, right? So we don't need trolleys. They can physically block dedicated bus lanes. That would be faster than trolleys probably. So the dedicated bus lanes you're talking about can be physically cordoned off. It's simple enough to do. It's just a matter of political will by the city and the MTA. It's the city, really. The city could cordon off those lanes and give dedicated, you know, green light. They could maneuver green lights when the buses are coming. It happens in other cities. It's easy enough to do, and it could be done. So we don't need trolleys. Although, if there's trolleys in New York City, we would definitely move to represent them, and we would welcome them. So, and then the other question is, the other thing, I'm not looking to facilitate traffic. I mean, I'm not looking to facilitate vehicular traffic, private vehicular traffic in Manhattan. It's not my goal. And I'm not looking to get rid of bikes in Manhattan either. I would be in favor of a Move New York plan or a Move New York-like plan that reduces the amount of vehicular traffic in Manhattan. Reducing the amount of vehicular traffic in Manhattan unto itself would increase bus speeds, and that's for sure. So I'm not looking to, you know, put the bikes into the outer boroughs and get them out of Manhattan. And I do agree with Ydanis to the extent that these urban planners or civil engineers or whoever's redesigning the streets of Manhattan have to bear in mind that there's a transit system in place that can't be encroached upon.
Okay, let me give you about international perspectives. It's amazing, everything I hear, we don't see the enemy out there. And I told you, the enemy is the automobile. The majority of people in New York City want public transit. They want dedicated bus lanes. They would love to have light rail transit. They like the bicycles, and they like pedestrian plazas. The enemy is the automobile. And I said, because the buses cannot go through because of the cars. It's not because of pedestrian plaza. Yes, the pedestrian plaza, yes, if it's overdone, of course, the buses. But for example, international best practice, worldwide best successful cities are the ones who promote those elements. Light rail transit on dedicated approaches or semi-dedicated, good enforcements for bus rapid transit, not bus rapid transit light like John said, bus rapid transit, real bus rapid transit, reliable subway systems, and the big difference worldwide is this. In New York, the policy is, we'll put out more service if you see the people, okay? Let's see people coming up, okay, maybe we have to add trains. In Paris, they say, we put the service out and the people will come. It's a different philosophy. You go into the Paris subway system, the train is always coming, not necessarily always full, but because the people know the train is coming always, they go into it, okay? So Portland, Oregon just built a huge bridge across the river. It has 3 things on it: light rail, bicycles, and pedestrians. Moves like a charm, trains go through, the people love it, successful. You go to Portugal, okay? Beautiful Eiffel Bridge, light rail, pedestrians, bicycles. Just comment about the bicycles. I live in a building in New York City, and one of my neighbors told me, says to me, I can't believe what happened just now, you're not gonna believe it. I see a bike station there, and they took away 2 parking spaces. And I said, excuse me, do you see how many bike spaces over there? 50. There are only 2 bikes left. So 48 people have used the bike, and you're talking about 2 parking spaces. So this is what I meant, that this automobile-centric thinking in this US is even here in New York, when we are not automobile-centric here. But this is American culture. And I can see this thinking in the middle of Kansas or whatever, the car is king, okay? But this city has been attacked by the car, the Ubers, yes. And that really hurts bus traffic. And when I was early in my career at the MTA, there was a gentleman who wrote a paper, and John is right, and the paper was called, Is It Faster Than Walking? And it meant about the buses. Buses can work fantastically if you get the enemy out of the way, the automobile, if you get good enforced lanes, well-managed systems, well-managed pedestrian plazas, and I agree, John, sometimes can be overdone, but this is a pedestrian city, and the new generation of people want a lifestyle change where they don't want to be in a car, okay? Because even if your car, people think car is door to door. It's not. Only in the movies you see an automobile go up in front of a restaurant and a beautiful young couple goes in a restaurant. When was the last time you used a car door to door in New York City? Okay, or in a shopping mall. You're a mile away from the shopping mall in the car, okay? I can go on forever, but I'm saying that we're all on the same page here, but we have to see the enemy. It's the automobile.
I'm going to stand up, I guess. Hi, my name is Santa Soriano. I work for the Community Service Society. Typically, we don't do transportation, but now we're also talking about some of the things that Pierina Sanchez spoke about access to public transportation, and to not forget people who cannot access transportation because they don't have the money. So talking about fares and moving from helping people who basically are moving out of the city because they cannot afford the city. We spoke to that about the previous panel, and helping people coming into the city having to pay transportation fare that they cannot afford. So we cannot forget about the people. A lot of people needs to help with their fares to get subsidized. And many people, if we are able to help the poor by subsidizing the fare, they may not come into the city because it's a small percentage of people who are poor who come to the city to work using their car because there's no parking. So they know that. And it will be an incentive to them if they can get better transportation faster, and on top of that, they are being subsidized with their fare. So that's one area that if you guys can address a little bit. And the second point I think is for Andrew. I don't know. I think that's for Andrew about you talk about riders and the behavior that we have in New York City. I agree about the 5 seconds. What I feel a little bit concerned about is that sometimes the government decides to go by the low-hanging fruit. So, okay, let's start talking about changing riders' behavior when that's probably a minimum part of what it is. And I know I see it because we're already talking about ticketing people for garbage. Maybe what we need is more maintenance worker that can clean up, right? But you cannot change people's behavior when you're not providing them with a better service, right? And I think that that talking about a rider's behavior is a very small part of it, but if you're looking at a general sense, of course, we have better trains, better ridership, it's all good. But I see politicians going to that low-hanging fruit, and I would like for you to address that a little bit more in terms of how you can avoid that pattern of politicians sometimes doing that.
So there's 2 in the back there, 2 or 3, and then we'll just...
Yes, thank you. My name is Jim Dingman. I have 2 questions. I managed a trucking company for about 15 years, and I've not heard that mentioned because unless the economy has changed dramatically in New York, trucks in the service sector and the manufacturing sector we know doesn't exist anymore are part of the issue and part of the problem. I saw studies in the 80s which talked about the rise in congestion of trafficking, of all types of vehicular traffic in the early 80s because we were trying to figure out why our vehicles were moving so slowly. So I wonder if that's accelerated. Secondly, the MTA doesn't really communicate the depth of these issues to the public. The gentleman talks about how workers get attacked. Well, I don't see communications. I lived in Rockaway for about 2 years. They didn't post anything out there about any of the kind of the maintenance things going on. And sometimes, the frustration is such that I, as a New Yorker, and I know many people feel, the hell with you guys. Let's just boycott you until you get your damn act together. Don't ride at all. And that's the feeling a lot of people have because the service is so screwed up, and I don't have to tell it to everybody here because we all experience it, that, deferring it to 2045, frankly, doesn't answer the problem of what's happening right now, which we experience all the time on a daily basis.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Bill. I'm a New York City resident and a lifetime user of public transit. I just wanted to say that although I've heard a lot of interesting discussion on the politics, the economics, certainly, of urban transportation, fundamentally what we're talking about here is an engineering situation. The New York City subway system, for all its faults, is a huge engineering success. It's made New York in the 20th century and into the 21st century what it is today. The reality, though, is New York is not what it was when the subway system was designed, starting in 1904 and the predecessor L lines. New York is a different city. It's expanded. It's more congested. It has huge areas of Brooklyn and Queens that are not covered, and Staten Island that are not covered by the subway system. And the reality is we need to look to the 21st century for changes, and I haven't heard a lot of discussion about that. The gentleman from the International Organization talked about Paris, London, China, and all of the new planning that's going on. We just don't see that here. I mean, to coin a phrase, the term urban transport really has the word sport in it, and part of the definition of sport means that the result is not predictable. And the problem in New York City is for most people, like myself who live in Eastern Queens, getting from there to Manhattan is not a predictable result in any given amount of time. What we need to do is go back and look at the reality. It'd be wonderful if we could just expand all the subway routes to cover the needs today, but that's trillions of dollars. The real answer that's worked in North America, in Europe, in Asia, has been in cities that are much, much less congested than New York, is to integrate light rail transit with heavy rail transit. Toronto has a wonderful system where the light rail system, the trolleys, or what was referred to as them, come right down into the subway station, where you go down into the station, you get off the streetcar, which takes you from a further out area, and just walk 8 feet across to the subway and get right on there. That's what we need to think about, and that's more affordable. It's worked in Denver, it's worked in Portland, everywhere else, and I haven't heard a lot of discussion on the engineering issues.
Okay, so I've been told that we're running out of time, so I want to take one more question on that side of and then we'll let the panelists answer.
Yeah, hi. Me and George, we go back to the 70s when the system was falling apart and wasn't being rebuilt. And so I think history is real critical. But I think that history goes back beyond where we're talking at this point to the original creation of the MTA, which was established in order to bail out Penn Central and the Long Island Railroad. And so I think some of our fundamental policy creators are really not focused on the subjects that we're talking about, and we really need to go way back. The other point I wanted to make is that in the 70s, not only was the subway declining, but the economy and the entire city was declining. So I think we should be optimistic because although there are significant issues of maintenance and so forth, the city is in an economic incline. We're growing, and that provides us with an opportunity for a large participation of both business and the population, because people aren't running to get out of the city, they're running to get here. From what I understand, 300,000 new residents since 2010. So I think we should be optimistic. I also want to congratulate the Murphy Institute for initiating this conversation, and I see that there's many areas of study that they could explore that would benefit the entire system, the city, transit workers, and all of us. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Final words from the panel?
First of all, one thing that we need to recognize is that this crisis has not happened overnight. We are not lacking ideas. So it's not that we haven't had these conversations. It's not that the TW Local 100 did not alert the MTA 20 years ago that if they did not put the money, if they continue cutting on upgrading the signal, we will get to this crisis. So this is about leadership. This is about understanding that the transportation system is so critical, not only for the city, for the state, but also for the nation. Why we don't have a tunnel, the new tunnel, that Congressman Nader have been fighting for so many years? Because at the federal level, there's not understanding that the city contribute much more to the federal government than what the federal government contributes to the city. So we cannot just sit in here thinking that, well, they have not been intellectual recommendation. Everyone contribute from the academic, to the day-by-day experience, to those in government. But we don't have time to be blaming. This is about today, tomorrow, and the future. We can upgrade the system. We can compete with London, our system competition city. And they are the one building in a much lower cost than what we are building here in New York City. We can say that we cannot compare with China, that we cannot compare in other places. But when we look at London, with a strong labor movement, they are rebuilding in the much lower price than what we're building here. So we need to control the costs. We need to raise permanent revenue to the MTA. And we need to execute the plan. A few years ago, I presented the idea of the routing center. I said a few years ago that we had to create the adopt station model that the other cities already have. Not for any private sector to come and say, we are the one doing the jobs, but for that private institution to put the funding in a major train station, let's say Times Square, but also be responsible to include other stations in the South Bronx that will not be attractive because they don't have the same traffic at the Times Square. So I think that there's good idea. I think that the new leadership of the MTA, they understand that people are fed up, that people are tired. As I said before, with the new bridge, built in a few years, when LaGuardia is going through reconstruction, I believe that the governor understands it, that the mayor understands it. This should happen in the next 10 years. And we need you, the advocate. You need you, the teacher. You know, those who are day by day looking at the transportation to get into the phone, to get into your email, to get into the social media. Put the pressure on. I think that this is the time for us to modernize the MTA. And with the fair fare, completely on board. You know, I think that we need to be sure that we are there for the working class, for those more than 40% New Yorkers living under the poverty lines. There's other cities already providing a subsidy for those New Yorkers. That's not the money that we're losing. That money comes back to our economy, to the local store. And I think that, you know, it is our responsibility. We can do it. But again, this is not new. It's not, we have not been lacking ideas. Ideas being there. It's about the goodwill. It's about leadership from the state and the city level to listening to the voices from local 100, from those at the grassroots movement and say, let's get it done now.
Just a comment about London, and I agree that most comparable to New York in terms of complexity, age, cost is London. And just to give you, because you brought me here for international best practices, tell you what London is doing. Number one, to address John's issue, London transport is really looking into new ways of utilizing labor, better lifestyles for their employees. So they sat down with the unions and they come up with what do the younger people want? Do they just want to, you know, drive a train back and forth all day long? Yes, some do, some don't, but they've elevated the people's lifestyles through better jobs. That's not just a labor issue, okay? They've started light rail. London never had light rail transit. Now they expanded light rail transit, okay? The biggest thing they've done, which is amazing, congestion management pricing. In London, there are 197 entry points to the city where, you know, where if you go through a zone, you automatically get charged, okay? In New York City, we can do it with 15. It's the easiest city in the world to implement congestion charging because you have the 12 avenues plus 3 or 4 bridges. 15 or 16 locations, easy, it's the easiest in the world. In London, it's 197 entry points, okay? Congestion management. What else is London doing? Crossrail, which means you can go from, let's say you live in Long Island, you'll be able to go on the one train to Trenton. You know, the new lifestyle, somebody mentioned here, I think the ladies from regional planning, that the father worked from, you know, worked in the Bronx, had to go to a job in Long Island. The biggest transportation trends in this region is not going to Manhattan in some cases, but go from region to region. London, Paris, Tokyo, and Moscow and Beijing are building circle lines around the city to connect people without having going into the core. So, okay, so we need a circle line, but of course here, because the enemy of this region is that we have 3 states, okay? So we could have like a half moon line, right? Because we can't go into Jersey. So this is just a issue, political issue here. So, and then last thing is bus rapid transit. So that's what they're doing. Circle line through regional rail, better use of labor, upgrading labor, the jobs, BRT, new ways of doing business, and light rail.
I don't think I remember all the questions to address, but the one that jumps off the page at me is, you just addressed a little bit, but the whole idea of light rail as a way to expand the system rather than digging tunnels, like you mentioned Utica Avenue. Imagine trying to dig a new subway tunnel down Utica Avenue right now in this climate. So the only thing I have to say, whether it's a circular line around New York City, whether it involves 3 states or not, and perhaps New Jersey or whatever, beyond, light rail as it is in Denver or a trolley system, put it into this perspective. we can't even come up with a monetary solution between New York State and New York City to fund the additional monies that it's going to cost to restore reliability into the New York City subway system, let alone come up with a plan to expand the transit system in New York City. We don't even have enough money to restore reliability into the system beyond a year or so from now, or less than a year. So we're talking about, we don't have enough money to operate this system properly and maintain this system properly. So it seems ludicrous to me that there be a real conversation. It's like a pipe dream to say that there could be a subway route down Utica Avenue, or there could be a circular route let alone involving a bunch of different states, or there could be light rail as a anecdote to dig in new subway tunnels in New York, when we can't even come up with the money. The politicians in New York can't even come up with the money to properly maintain the system without getting into a massive dispute. So transit has to become a massive priority. This Move New York, or a Move New York-like plan, or a whole combination, a whole cocktail of different fixes needs to come into play that can properly fund operating and reliability of this system, as well as capital and state of good repair investment, and then expansion project investment. And that's just not a reality right now. It's not in the mix. It's just not happening. So it's a $30 billion commitment, not investment, but commitment right now over this 5-year capital plan. And at the end of this 5-year capital plan, we're going to have a state of good repair. That's what we'll have, essentially. And so beyond that, everybody needs to gird themselves for the argument about the reliability of the New York City subway system in 2018 and 2019 before there's even any kind of serious discussion about expansion of the system. That's the reality. So anyway, I don't remember what the other questions were, but I do want to say thank you for putting on the forum as well. It's different than I thought it was going to be, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
Great. So that, apologize for people who weren't able to ask their questions, but that's all, folks. So one more time for the panel. Thank you.